African Dialogue, looking at different events in depth, discussing a variety of issues.
This is a very significant historical election.
This crisis is still damaging, especially Finnish and European economies very hardly, and that's an important reason to get more and more cooperation.
And what we see here is a clear violation of, one, the rights to privacy of Tiwonge and Stephen, and also we see Malawi violating its international commitments.
Well, the position of Greenpeace is that it's been a disappointing meeting for marine species in particular.
African Dialogue, a talk show where we cover anything and everything.
Welcome to African Dialogue on Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance. We are coming to you live this morning from CTICC. That's in Cape Town, and that's the Cape Town International Convention Center, where the African Utility Week and Clean Power Africa Conference and Exhibition are taking place over the next 2 days. That's the 14th and the 15th. You're with me, Faith Baloyi, your host, and today we look at the energy potential of Africa and how to implement a diverse mix of energy resources to guarantee future energy security on the continent.
African Utility Week is taking place in Cape Town from the 14th to the 15th of May, and Channel Africa will be there. As the largest utility event of its kind, it has been bringing together African utilities and service providers for more than 13 years. The event is co-located with the Clean Power Africa event, which provides a unique focus on renewable energy. The events are expected to be attended by more than 5,000 power and water professionals from all over the continent. If you can't be at this year's African Utility Week and Clean Power Africa events, then join Channel Africa's African Dialogue program for live broadcasts from 1100 to 1200 Central African Time during the event, or keep up to date by listening to our current affairs programs. For more information, go to websites www.african-utility-week.com or www.clean-power-africa.com, or take a trip to channelafrica.org. Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance.
Welcome back to our program this morning. We are coming to you live from Cape Town, where the African Utility Week conference is taking place at the CTICC. That's the Cape Town International Convention Center. Now, water scarcity is among the main problems to be faced by many societies in Africa. Not only are we talking here about drinking water, but mainly water that is needed for generating electricity in most parts of the continent. The African Utility Week Conference is an annual conference that facilitates discussions around the opportunities in the power sector and has also assisted African utilities providing electricity and water to all of Africa. So our program today, we are going to be looking at the energy potential of Africa and how to implement a diverse mixture of resources. To give us more on that, let's hear from Claire Falk-Fane. She's Program Director at Africa Utility Week, who spoke to Sydney Katunga Perry earlier on about the conference.
Well, African Utility Week started almost 13 years ago as a fairly small event at the ESCOM Convention Center in Randburg, and has now grown to an exhibition of just over 200 exhibitors, some 5,000 delegates and visitors, and we are very proud to say that we are the largest Pan-African power and water event on the continent. Now, the purpose behind the conference is obviously to bring people together in order for them to network, for them to learn from one another, and for them to engage with their peers in 3 fairly intense days in a way that they don't normally get to do during the rest of the year. In addition to that, they have the opportunity to walk the really amazing exhibition floor. We have a number of people that are on the cutting edge of technology as far as the power sector is concerned, that have brought the technology to the exhibition so that people can actually experience hands-on how it works, what the implications are for the power sector, and more importantly, how these technologies can make their jobs easier, more efficient, and hopefully less costly.
Right, Claire, it's important, to congratulate you. 13 years of intensive, work. Coming now this year, the 13th year, coinciding with the 50th anniversary of African unity. What have been the problems, teething problems, especially in generation of energy in the continent?
I think that there's a lot of reason for utilities to be optimistic. It's amazing to see the number of new developments that are coming up across the continent, and not just in the sort of traditional generation technologies, but also ones that are focusing on particularly renewable energies. I think for a long time people have seen the African continent as being a very high-risk environment. But that perception is changing now, and people are feeling that Africa is actually the kind of place that they want to get into to do business. And that is having a very positive effect on our utility sector. We're seeing a lot more IPPs, that's independent power producers, that are starting to come into the sector. I think it helps that the legislative and regulatory frameworks within our utilities are changing. They're becoming more accommodating for independent people to operate. And I think we have, as a continent, have become more aware of the fact that without power, our economies are never going to grow. So there is a huge push towards growing additional generation capacity. I believe World Bank figures state that we need approximately 1,000 megawatts per annum just in order for us to keep pace with the current economic growth. Obviously, if we want to be in a position where we have a deficit of power, we're going to need to be building a lot more of that. And current figures are something like $43 billion a year just on power infrastructure. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I, for one, am very optimistic when I see the huge changes and the developments that have occurred over the last 10 or 15 years. I'm feeling very optimistic about the future of Africa, and particularly the future of the African power sector.
But looking back, we've seen that the hydroelectric generation, because of water scarcity, has gone low. What is it that you can say about the alternatives?
Look, I think that a lot of countries were very hydro-reliant. I mean, unfortunately, we have seen the impact of that in places like Kenya and Uganda. But I think that a lot of the utilities are becoming more aware of the need to diversify their energy mix, the need to make sure that they are not putting all their eggs in one basket. And as we are developing from a technological point of view and also from a generation capacity point of view, you are seeing a lot more technologies that are coming into play. The Kenyans, for instance, are putting a lot of emphasis on developing geothermal. We know that, for instance, in South Africa we have nuclear, and there's a lot of talk about potentially expanding our nuclear portfolio. There are a number of other countries in Africa that are very interested in examining nuclear to see how that can potentially add to their generation mix. And then, of course, one of the technologies that has the capacity to be an enormous game changer is renewable energy. And particularly in Africa, where we're blessed with enormous solar resources, we have enormous wind resources, and it's very encouraging to see the development of 3 really big projects from a wind perspective happening in countries outside of South Africa, particularly Kenya and Ethiopia. So I'm very excited to see how Africa is embracing these new technologies and how we're using this as an opportunity to show that we are not only environmentally conscious, but that we are also determined to grow our power sector and thereby grow our economies.
That was Claire Falkfane, who spoke to Sydney Peary earlier today. We are still at the African Utility Week.
African Utility Week is taking place in Cape Town from the 14th to the 15th of May, and Channel Africa will be there. As the largest utility event of its kind, it has been bringing together African utilities and service providers for more than 13 years. The event is co-located with the Clean Power Africa event, which provides a unique focus on renewable energy. The events are expected to be attended by more than 5,000 power and water professionals from all over the continent. If you can't be at this year's African Utility Week and Clean Power Africa events, then join Channel Africa's African Dialogue program for live broadcasts from 1100 to 1200 Central African Time during the event, or keep up to date by listening to our current affairs programs. For more information, go to websites www.african-utility-week.com or www.clean-power-africa.com, or take a trip to channelafrica.org. Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance.
Welcome back to African Utility Week. You're with African Dialogue, and we are at the Cape Town International Conventional Center. And joining us today is Valerie Issumo. She's from Prana Sustainable Water. Welcome to African Dialogue, Prana.
Good day.
Can you just give us some background on your organization and why you think Africa Utility Week is such an important venture on the continent at the moment?
I've been all around Africa when I was trading soft commodities of mainly sugar and cocoa. And I have some African origins from Congo, from DRC. I have a mother from Belgium. And the African Utility Week is for me very important in the sense that it's not only a lot of things to be done, but the potential of Africa is extremely big. I think even Africa can solve the European or the US crisis today because we have a dynamic population, quite young, very creative, and we have a lot of resources in Africa.
We're also seeing that lots of foreign investors in the power and energy sector flocking to the continent. What opportunities do they see in Africa? Can we go a little bit into that?
Yes. Regarding the power, or when we look already at the hydropower, check the Inga dam, the DRC dam, that could potentially export its power up to north of Africa or South Africa. It's huge. When you check on the power that, for example, the United States has with the shale gas or the oil, I don't know what are the sustainability of this power, but I think it's extremely dangerous to go in ways where we don't have any, let's say, track records. And even in Europe, as you know, we have the nuclear power, quite a lot, extensive, without any security checks, in the sense that if we trace the nuclear waste since the beginning, we look only at 1/3 of it, and we don't know where the balance is. So where did they hide the nuclear waste, if I can say like that?
Yeah, nuclear power is another alternative that's been cited into new energy production, looking into the future, not only of the continent but of the globe, as you've stated. What are the attitudes stemming from Africa towards nuclear use?
As you know, the uranium is coming from Niger, from Namibia. Again, I'm afraid about the safety of the nuclear power. If you look at Fukushima, and if you look where the nuclear power stations are located nearby populations, it's not as safe as the renewable energies. If you have a wind farm, and yes, it might kill some birds, but the wind farms are located, for example, in the sea or in a mountain where nothing can be damaged. I mean, not a lot of things can be damaged. If you look at the biogas from sludge, from the effluents, from wastewater, it's just recovering the methane, so the biogas from a biodigester. So where is the danger about that? While the nuclear power, even if there is no external danger, like it can be maybe an attack, a cyber attack, or another kind of attack like extremism and so on, I think it's unsafe. So we shouldn't go in Africa to things that potentially are very dangerous.
Can you outline the discourse around it, this entire nuclear debate? I mean, is there obviously a humanitarian outcry? Is there a big kind of NGO following and an environmentalist campaign that's anti? What's been going on?
No, I'm not in the NGO sector. I think, yes, it's good for them to raise the awareness, but the NGO most of the time, they criticize, they don't bring solutions. If you look at the wastewater, because that's the sector I'm in, you have about 80% of the wastewater that is untreated in the world, the majority, of course, in Africa, not in South Africa, because here you're doing well. But there is energy, the heat from the waste water. You can recover the biogas. You can even grow some algae with the algae you press that makes biofuels. There are so many possibilities. So I am devoting my life, if I can say like that, to the cause of solving the wastewater issues.
So what are the biggest challenges to the African energy/water market? You said South Africa is doing quite well. Just elaborate more.
For the wastewater, you're doing well because almost all the wastewater is treated, which is not the case of the other countries. Yeah. If you go, for example, in a country like DRC, you have some people dying because of cholera, although there is plenty of water. So the water risks are not only in terms of availabilities or volumes, it's also the question of the quality. Because some wastewater can contaminate not only the people but also the NAP and the potential growth of a country.
Let's talk more about looking at efficient management of resources. What kind of education and support mechanisms need to be put in place and technologies need to be exposed to the continent in order to get us going on that?
I think the most important thing is if some people are ready to pay for food, for diamond, or for the energy sector, like the water sector, should have progressive tariffs. Like the more you consume, the more you pay per unit. But we should go on full cost recovery, but basis safe energy sources.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to you. Have a nice
Thanks,
day.
Valerie. And I hope we hear from you again on African Dialogue. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Let's take a short break. We'll be speaking to more guests after the interlude. Just remember, we are coming to you from the Cape Town International Convention Center, and we are covering the African Utility Week and Clean Power Africa Conference and exhibition taking place today and tomorrow. More for that after the break.
We have gathered at this stadium in Durban to carry out a solemn and historic act, the launch of the African Union, ensure that Africans own and control Africa permanently from Cape to Cairo.
Join Channel Africa in celebrating Africa Month, culminating in Africa Day on the 25th of May. Let's honor our heroes.
This mid-20th century is Africa's. This decade is the decade of African independence. Forward then to independence now. Tomorrow, the United States of Africa.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African.
Channel Africa, the voice of the African Renaissance.
Welcome back to African Dialogue. We are coming to you from the Cape Town International Convention Center, and we are with African Utility Week and Clean Power Africa. That's the conference taking place over the 14th and 15th. And joining us now is Joseph Mashao. He is our guest from South Africa. He's from Solar Technology, a company called SMA, Systems Technology Equipment. How are you, sir? Welcome to African Dialogue.
Thank you.
Mr. Mashao, can you just tell us a little bit about what your company does?
Our company was founded more than 31 years ago, and the focus of our company is to develop cutting-edge technology for solar PV energy generation. We manufacture inverters ranging from small scale to utility scale. We are presently supplying into the renewable energy IPP program in South Africa for round 1 and the recently closed round 2. We pride ourselves by the fact that we spend a lot of time and resources ensuring that our technology is developed for all environments, and we test accordingly to ensure that we can deploy all this equipment around the globe without having major failures.
What kind of reception is the use of using solar inventors? How is it being accommodated in South Africa especially, or the SADC region in general?
The South African and Southern African market, it's a very new market, but the energy that we've seen in the past year has been quite good. There is a lot of interest, and I think most of it is because for you to bring all this energy from the sun available, it's a shorter implementation time compared to all the normal known generation plants of fossil, nuclear and hydro.
What are the energy challenges we are actually facing on the continent? Can you just give us an idea into that window?
First of all, I think we need to recognize that in as much as Africa it's got a very large population, out of the 1.3 billion people in the world that do not have access to electricity, the majority is in Africa. We do have a lot of resources, but unfortunately access to energy in the continent, including other resources like water, it's actually at very low levels. We believe that with Africa embracing new technologies in renewables, we will be able to close the energy gap much quicker than if we go with the traditional generating methods.
What challenges are you finding?
At present, in the South African market specifically, the challenges from a household, industrial and commercial perspective is that the rules of terminating and putting the power into the households and facilities are not purely defined. Every municipality or regional authority, they apply their minds and make decisions. I think we need to develop those rules as soon as we can so that we can enable the deployment of these technologies in our industry and households.
I currently read something quite scary. It said that Africa at the moment represents only 31% of global electrical consumption. But by 2020, electrical consumption in Africa will have increased by 60%. 2020 is only 7 years away. Do we have a lot to be worried about?
I think if we strategically act quick and ensure that we embrace these technologies, we should be able to meet that challenge and even exceed it. And I think it will take both public sector, private sector, and the funding institutions to come together to enable these things because it requires quite a sizable amount of financial resources and commitment for them to take off the ground.
Thank you so much. We've been talking to Joseph Mashau. He's our guest from Solar Technology in South Africa. Thank you so much for being with us on African Dialogue today.
Thank you.
And we are joined by Mr. Musara Beta. He's from Zimbabwe and he's Chief Marketing Analyst of Southern Africa Power Pools. Welcome to African Dialogue, sir. We are also with Robert Nyamvumba. He's Deputy Director General at Energy, Water and Sanitation Authority. He's all the way from Rwanda. Welcome to African Dialogue.
Thank you.
Mr. Nyamvumba, I'd like to start with us. Can you just paint us a picture of the energy situation in your region? What's happening on the eastern side of Africa?
Thank you. As you say, I'm Robert Nyamvumba. I work for EWSA, Energy, Water and Sanitation Authority. It is a public utility for Rwanda. I came here for this event, Africa Utility Week. Just representing EWSA, which brings electricity and water to our esteemed customers in Rwanda. As part of West Africa, Rwanda is having an installed capacity of 110, but with challenges of access to electricity that is currently at 16%. We intend to develop systems in energy sector that we feel that in the next 5 years we'll be having an installed capacity of 560 megawatt. This is an addition of around 500 megawatt on grid in the next 5 years. This is to increase access to electricity, especially in rural areas, from current 16 to 70%. This is a target, but achievable. We have other projects to power where power from Ethiopia through Kenya, Uganda, and of course to Rwanda. We currently have construction kickstarting soon for 220 kV transmission lines that will be linking us with Uganda and of course with Kenya. This will enable us to start rethinking of doing business in energy trade. Of course, we are developing hydropower projects, methane, peat to power. Some we are planning in the next 4 years to have an additional 18.5 megawatt from solar. So all these we need to have an energy mix that's more on renewable energy sources, to have a bigger portion of renewable energy sources in our utility.
Mr. Beta, you deal with power utilities in SADC countries. Can you also just give us an outline on the situation in this region?
Thank you very much. Like you said, my name is Musara Beta. I'm representing the Southern African Power Pool, which is a power pool of all the SADC power utilities. Currently, we are a total of 16 members, of which 12 are national power utilities. We have 9 countries that are interconnected, and 3 are currently not interconnected. These are Angola, Tanzania, and Malawi. And one of our priorities is to interconnect these countries. Currently, we generate a total of about 56,000 megawatts. But as you may be aware, we have got a lot of load shedding in most countries. because all that 56,000 megawatts is not always available. We have around 48,000 megawatts available against our demand in excess of 50,000. So if we look at suppressed demand, we have got about 6,000 that is actually shared on a regular basis, and that is not desirable. So what we are doing, we are currently implementing a number of projects. So by 2016, we intend to inject close to 16,000 megawatts. Hopefully, by that time, we expect very little or no load shedding. But as you may be aware, we have got old power stations. So as we put new power stations, we also have got to retire some old power stations. So it's always an ongoing process. And in terms of renewable energy, we also want to reduce our carbon emission power stations. Currently, our coal-fired power stations contribute 74%, and we want to reduce that to about 56% by 2025. So that's our target, and we have to increase our renewable energy generation. And currently, in the 16,000 that we are going to inject, we have got about 56% of that being renewable energy, of course, including large hydro power projects.
Mr. Robert, we're just hearing from Mr. Bita here about carbon footprints, and I just want to hear your views on what's coming into play, which is the implementation of carbon tax. What are your thoughts on that?
Like I told you, we are developing projects that are more for renewable energy sources. The reason we are focusing on that, we've been for a long time depending on diesel thermal generators, which are very expensive. So we need to phase them with renewable energy sources power plants. With that, we have programs with partners to make sure that we develop these renewable energy sources in the next 5 years to have an increase of around 80 megawatt coming from renewable energy sources. So with that, we've have that initiative to, of course, to reduce the dependence of diesel by bringing more of energy renewable sources. We're working with partners to make sure that we have also incentives in carbon credit.
Mr. Bita, clearly we're seeing that there's a move from the traditional power generation to the new alternative, solar, wind, and even nuclear. Can you talk to us about the teething problems you're finding in moving into renewable energy sources?
One of the major problems is our tariffs. As you may be aware, I think Southern Africa, we have got the lowest tariff. Of course, some may argue, but our tariffs are not yet cost reflective for most of the countries. And when we introduce renewable energy, these are very highly costly in terms of putting up the infrastructure. So that's one of the biggest challenges we are facing, but we are not sitting and relaxing. I must also maybe highlight that we have recently formed an electrification working group, which is going to focus mainly on addressing our low electrification rates. And we want to utilize our renewable resources. As you may be aware, we have got a lot of solar, wind, and I think South Africa has taken a giant step in the new renewable initiative, which we have seen close to 3,000 megawatts already being under implementation. And in most countries, solar is also playing a bigger role. In Zimbabwe, I think they are planning for about 100 megawatts solar plant. Botswana, Namibia, there's a lot of initiative on off-grid electrification, because we also realize that extending the grid all the time to rural areas at times is quite expensive. You get one or two customers. So in such circumstances, we encourage off-grid electrification. So we, I can say, managing the challenges we are facing. Of course, finance is also one of the biggest challenges, but I think with the reforms that are happening within the region, private players are also taking a bigger role, especially on main hydro projects and off-grid electrification projects.
So new infrastructure is clearly going to be costly. Now, what happens to the old infrastructure? This is in the context of infrastructural decay, especially looking at, in your region, the Kariba Dam and the Cabora Bassa dams. What happens to them? Do you just leave them to decay because you're creating new infrastructure?
I think one advantage we have got with the hydro project is they can last for a very long time. They might appear old in terms of age, but I can tell you that those are our most reliable power plants. What we have a bigger challenge on is thermal power stations. Those ones, when they get old, they become very inefficient. And what we are doing, all these projects that I've alluded to, are there to replace some of the aging power plants. But with hydro, I must emphasize that we have got a way to manage the cavitations that come with hydro dams, and we are extending their lifespans. In fact, we are putting new generation units at Kariba. In Zambia, the project is already underway. In Zimbabwe, construction is going to start in the next few months. The contractor is already on site. So we are not entirely retiring those. And at Cabora Bassa, we have got a plan to put new plants on the northern side. So with hydro, we are just managing the cavitation of the dams, but we are not planning to retire the power plants at all.
And then, Mr. Robert, can you tell us a little bit on the production of developing new technology, in us looking as do we have a skill force, especially in Africa in general, but looking at your region? I'm talking about training. Are you capacitated enough? Which partnerships are you getting into in as far as being equipped to be able to upgrade these new technologies and facilitate these new technologies happening in your region?
Thank you. Like I've said, we are developing projects currently totaling to almost 500 megawatts. Most of them are highly competitive and with new technologies. If I mention, I say geothermal, that we intend to develop. Most of the sites that yet we haven't known the potential, but we anticipate almost more than 200. If P2 power is a new technology for us, methane gas is something that is new, the latest technology that is developed fast in the world. I would say now when we are focusing on skills from expatriates worldwide to make sure that we have these projects fast-tracked to make sure that we do not take even a single mistake when in the pipeline of projects. The same comes to a utility. We need to manage these projects either with contracts with private partnership or independent power producers. With that, our focus to make sure that these projects are well managed, we've emphasized on capacity building with enhancing to skilled engineers, lawyers, and of course specialists in procurement. With that, we believe we can fast track this energy project with skilled laborers, local and of course with international players in this energy sector.
Thanks very much. And that's words for Mr. Robert Nyamvumba. He's Deputy Director General at EWSA in Rwanda. That's the Energy, Water and Sanitation Authority. We've also been speaking to Mr. Musara Beta, who's Chief Marketing Analyst of Southern African Power Pool. And they deal with power utilities in the SADC countries. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being on African Dialogue.
Thank you very much.
That's it for today. We were coming to you live from Cape Town, South Africa, where the African Utility Week is taking place from today until tomorrow at the Cape Town International Convention Center. You've been with African Dialogue. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow between 11 and 12 Central African Time, when we will continue looking at new uses of energy with the experts in the field. From myself, Faith Baloy, my producer Sydney Katunga Piri, my technical producer Luyanda Mathian, and not to forget our marketing team. Have a great Tuesday.
On en a marre de parler du passé. Ça suffit. L'avenir est tout ce qui compte. On a deux choix. La guerre et le désespoir, ou le bonheur et le développement.
Ça suffit. L'avenir est tout ce qui compte. On a deux choix. La guerre et le désespoir, ou le bonheur et le développement.
On attend de nos dirigeants la direction et la sagesse. On cherche entre nous le courage et l'enthousiasme. On se demande si on s'en sortira ou pas. Est-ce que l'Afrique peut changer davantage?
siqana sodwa siqedana sodwa sidabulana sodwa safa indlala safa udlame safa ingculaza inkokheli zethu sikhokheleni ngeqiniso kuyoze kube nini na Afrika kusini Afrika mashariki phenduka Afrika enhle sekwanele shesha Afrika